Welcome everyone, Baha Ben. Thank you for being with us today for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's virtual conference, Post-COVID-19 Economic Priorities in the Kurdistan Region of Iraq. This is being done in partnership with a KRG representative here in Washington, D.C. I am Steve Lutz, Vice President for Middle East Affairs at the U.S. Chamber and President of our U.S. Iraq Business Council. While I wish we were together in person, it's a real delight to be coming together virtually with so many friends from the Kurdistan region, Iraq, and all across the Middle East. And let me begin on a somber note by offering that we are holding this forum amidst a global pandemic that has not only inflicted tremendous human toll and loss, but that has also caused severe economic harm and uncertainty around the world. I believe that during times like these, it's more vital than ever that we pull closer to friends and allies and work together in the spirit of partnership. Despite the immense hardships and suffering caused by the coronavirus, I believe there's an opportunity for us to come through this and the other challenges facing us as even stronger partners. Our U.S. Chamber of Commerce headquarters in Washington may be closed due to the realities of COVID, but our work continues. And in many respects, the work that we do now and going forward is more important than ever before. As the world's largest business advocacy organization, interest of more than 3 million American companies of all sizes and sectors across all 50 United States, the U.S. Chamber has a pivotal role to play in helping to drive us through this crisis and on a road to economic recovery. And this certainly includes the work that we're doing in the Kurdistan region, Iraq, and again, throughout the entire Middle East. At the U.S. Chamber, we are proud to be the home to the U.S. Iraq Business Council. The council is co-chaired by Hillwood, HKN Energy, and ExxonMobil, and it comprises leading businesses from all key sectors across the economy. To provide some context, we have a long history of collaboration with the Kurdistan region of Iraq. It was in 2015 that we were honored to host then-President Massoud Barzani at our headquarters in Washington, D.C. for a major event with U.S. business leaders. We have organized and led several business missions to the Kurdistan region, most recently in June of 2019, when we visited Erbil and brought a delegation of more than 50 businessmen and women from 30 companies to meet with both government and business leaders. And just last November, we were in Erbil for the Nineveh Investment Forum. These are just a few examples of our high-level engagement, which have shown that across a range of industries, there is broad interest in opportunities in the Kurdistan region. So despite the challenges facing us, we host today's conference to build upon our prior work and demonstrate our commitment to the future of the Kurdistan region and all of Iraq. I sincerely hope that we can work together and advance reforms to bring more American companies and develop new partnerships in the Kurdistan region. And we want to do more than just hope. We endeavor to transform that interest into tangible action, all the while educating more American companies about opportunities throughout the entire economy, from agriculture, health, finance, and infrastructure, to energy, logistics, telecommunications, and so much more. At the U.S. Chamber, we are dedicated to working to deepen and expand American commercial activity and investment. We not only want companies to boost their footprint and create jobs and put more effort into this economy, we want to help put the economy there on a sustained path of growth. And we know that businesses can do much more. It can bring people and cultures closer together. While stronger business ties are certainly in our good economic interest, they are also in our mutual strategic interest. And we certainly appreciate that businesses cannot do all of this alone. We need effective and dynamic leaders in government. And it's vital for the business community to have a close collaborative working relationship with our friends in government. And I'm pleased to say that that exists today. We have experienced strong support from our U.S. Ambassador, Matthew Tueller, Consul General Rob Waller, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Iraq, David Copley, and at Department of Energy, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for International, Dr. Matt Zeiss. And of course, they have great teams supporting them as well, and many others across the U.S. government. We've also enjoyed strong support from the Kurdistan representative to the United States. Thank you so very much, Bayan Khan and Tara Khan in your office. And we, of course, enjoy a very close working relationship with Iraq's ambassador to the United States, Dr. Fareed Yassin. Certainly, last but not least, I want to thank His Excellency Mansour Barzani, the Prime Minister of the Kurdistan Regional Government. We have a constructive history of working together in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, and we are looking to the future and focused on what we should next be doing together. We want to continue to work in partnership with your government to improve the business environment, those policies and regulations which impact operations as well as investment decisions. With your leadership and support, we will work in cooperation to grow our economic ties to everyone's benefit. Of course, we're not naive. We know that Iraq and the Kurdistan region of Iraq continue to face a variety of challenging circumstances, ranging from the wake of destruction left by ISIS and the ongoing toll of the coronavirus to the oil price crash and related fiscal issues, all of which lead to mounting economic uncertainty. And while it may not be a total cure-all, we can agree that empowering the private sector and sparking economic growth to drive job creation, investment, and entrepreneurism can help alleviate some of this burden by bringing a combination of both hope and tangible actual progress in the Kurdistan region and more broadly Iraq. On behalf of the U.S. Chamber, we look forward to sustaining our working relationship with our partners in the Kurdistan region of Iraq to drive economic growth and to make the reforms that will make a difference and have a real inclusive impact on your citizens. So we look forward to today's discussion as well as tomorrow's, with the goal of bringing together business leaders and government officials to explore both opportunities for commercial and investment ties. And this conference will certainly underscore the important cooperation that we have in the energy sector while highlighting areas for U.S. companies to help diversify the economy in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. And of course, as the U.S. Chamber, we want to emphasize economic reforms that are rooted in a governance regime that is predictable, transparent, and equitable, that is necessary to support a resilient, diverse, and dynamic private sector in the Kurdistan region and all of Iraq. And with this in mind, I do want to turn to our partner and our co-host for this conference, Her Excellency Bayan Sami Rahman, the Kurdistan Regional Government's representative to the United States. Bayan Khan, Zora Spas, we could not have done this without you, and we look forward to hearing your welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's a pleasure to see you on screen. I wish we could be together, but hopefully we will be able to do that soon. So good morning or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, depending on where you are. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm delighted that so many American companies have joined us at this virtual conference, as well as the many Kurdish businesses and audiences that are watching us live on TV and on Facebook through Rudao Television, which is the media partner of this conference. I'd like to thank you, Steve, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and especially you, Steve, the President of the U.S. Iraq Business Council, and your colleague Anna Burris, Manager of Middle East Affairs at the Chamber. Your stellar cooperation with our team here in Washington has helped us to bring this conference together. During this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a great deal of uncertainty and gloom, and my heart goes out to those who have lost loved ones to the coronavirus. Ambitions and dreams have been disrupted, and jobs have been lost in economies, large and small. Many businesses in Kurdistan, in Iraq, and in the United States are struggling and hoping they can just keep their heads above water and outlast the pandemic. At a time like this, it is essential that we look ahead and map out what our post-COVID-19 lives will be like. And that is the theme of this conference. It is to explore the Kurdistan Regional Government's economic priorities, the Kurdistan region's potential, and importantly, to keep the door to business open, especially for our American friends. We are honored that so many distinguished speakers are joining us today and tomorrow. His Excellency Prime Minister Masroor Barzani and the Honorable Mark Menezes, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Energy, will be delivering their remarks shortly. Deputy Prime Minister Qubat Talabani and a host of KRG ministers, U.S. officials, including Ambassador Matthew Tula, Iraq's envoy to Washington, Ambassador Farid Yassin, and some very exciting entrepreneurs will also be engaging us in this event. We are grateful to all the speakers and participants, each of whom will bring their own insights and expertise to this conversation. While we have much work to do in this conference, I believe it is also an opportunity to celebrate the strong and growing partnership between the Kurdistan region in Iraq and the United States. In a recent column in an American newspaper, I wrote that the Kurdistan region in Iraq has much to thank the United States for, but we also have high expectations of our partner. Seeing the list of speakers that have come together and the wonderful cooperation we have from the U.S. Chamber to support this conference, is this an indication that some of those expectations are being met? With that, I wish all of our honored guests, speakers, viewers, and participants an informative, engrossing, and successful conference. And with that, I have the great pleasure of handing over to my esteemed colleague, who I knew very well when he was in Washington, the Honorable Robert Waller, the U.S. Consul General in Erbil. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Bayan. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to those of you here in the Kurdistan region, and good morning to everyone joining us in the United States. It's a real pleasure to be with you today, and I want to start by thanking Steve Lutz and his team at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as well as our friends at the U.S. Iraq Business Council for organizing this timely and important conference. Steve has been a champion of increased trade and investment between the United States and the Kurdistan region, and I'm confident that the distinguished panelists that we'll be hearing from during this conference support that goal as well. Let me share 3 brief points at the outset. First, for our private sector colleagues, I want you to know that our entire consulate team is here to support your efforts. Promoting stronger business ties between the United States and the Kurdistan region is right at the top of our policy agenda, and there is nothing that we enjoy more than assisting and advocating for U.S. businesses. Energy, of course, is the driving force behind this region's economy and is a sector in which the United States is well positioned to continue providing expertise and investment. But I should also stress that there is no shortage of opportunity in other sectors as well, as Steve mentioned earlier, especially in agriculture, banking and finance, technology, and healthcare. Second, I want to emphasize that the Kurdistan regional government warmly welcomes U.S. companies. And in particular, I want to commend the steps that Prime Minister Barzani and his cabinet have taken to help U.S. companies succeed. For example, the region's investment law provides tax incentives and a streamlined registration process to assist U.S. investors in getting started here. With U.S. help, the KRG has increased the number of government services that are transparently documented and explained online. In addition, the Prime Minister recently stood up a task force to help American companies cut through red tape. That effort is already producing tangible results, and it's further evidence of the warm welcome that America received here in the Kurdistan region. Finally, for our KRG colleagues, I would simply note that American companies bring to the table a value proposition that encompasses cutting-edge technology, unparalleled training and customer support, and a commitment to transparency and corporate social responsibility that is in a league of its own. As the Kurdistan region prepares to further develop and diversify its economy in the post-COVID era, we look forward to being part of your success and to further strengthening our close ties. Zor spas, and thank you.
Thank you, Rob and Bayan, for those encouraging and perceptive welcome remarks. We very much appreciate all that you're both doing to help grow this relationship. And we do appreciate your engagement and support of this conference. I now have the honor of welcoming Mark Menzies, the Deputy Secretary of the United States Department of Energy, to our conference. The Deputy Secretary brings a rich blend of private sector and government experience to the table through many positions he's held in the energy sector prior to coming to the Department of Energy. He served as an executive at Berkshire Hathaway Energy and Chief Counsel, Energy and Environment at the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Energy and Commerce. Mark, we're absolutely delighted to have you with us today and very much look forward to hearing your keynote remarks and your thoughts on this important energy relationship. Mark, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve, for that introduction and your earlier remarks about our challenges returning from the COVID pandemic, and yet the opportunities that it brings and the many partnerships that we enjoy, both between our governments, the regions, the business sector. I would also like to thank the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the U.S. Iraq Business Council for inviting me to speak at today's forum. It's great to join all of you in a virtual capacity to discuss the Iraq Kurdistan region's promising energy future, even in the face of COVID-19's undeniable impact. But before I do, let me take a moment to offer my condolences and those of U.S. Energy Secretary Bruyette in response to the recent loss of two distinguished Kurdish statesmen. We mourn the passing of Dr. Najmuddin Kerim, the former Kirkuk governor and a tireless advocate for all Kurds. We remember Dr. Kerim as a George Washington University neurosurgeon who treated many Americans, including James Brady, who was shot during the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan. And we are deeply saddened as well by the sudden passing of Erbil's governor, Firsat Sofi. Our thoughts and our prayers go out to their families and to the people of Kurdistan. Mr. Prime Minister, honorable ambassadors, your excellencies, distinguished speakers, colleagues and friends. Secretary Bruyette has made a point of remaining engaged in the Kurdistan region's energy sector and continuing his frequent contact with Prime Minister Barzani, and for good reasons. Simply stated, the Secretary, the Department of Energy, and the entire U.S. government appreciate the critical value of the U.S. Kurdistan partnership and of energy and U.S. investment in the region. In August, the Secretary participated in Prime Minister Karami's landmark visit to Washington, an event that demonstrated Iraq's commitment to reform. We were clearly encouraged by that commitment, and we were delighted that senior KRG representatives were included in the delegation, and we were able to speak on topics highlighting the common interests of Baghdad and Erbil in cementing U.S. support and investment. That single visit to Washington empowered more progress on U.S. energy projects in Iraq over the last 2 months than in the last 2 years. We are enormously hopeful that as they work together, Baghdad and Erbil can implement the reforms that are necessary for these vital projects to proceed. And we are hopeful as well that continued progress of this kind will attract even more investment so northern Iraq can fulfill its enormous potential. Last week's Kurdistan Economic Diversification Forum signaled the region's desire to take the critically important step of developing a wider range of energy sources, in addition to oil and gas. Doing so can only help make the region a great energy hub, which in turn will attract investment in non-energy sectors as well. So how does the IKR in Iraq emerge as a regional energy hub? First and foremost, market-based reforms must continue. Reform is not always easy. It can be unsettling at first, but the good news is once we allow markets to work, they can do absolute wonders for people everywhere. In my own country, when President Trump dramatically reduced regulations on energy, we accelerated an energy revolution that is transforming the world. And when the president did likewise across our economy, we saw unemployment fall to the lowest levels ever before the advent of COVID-19. We understand that the coronavirus has created enormous challenges for economies reliant on oil revenues. In our own country, oil production has declined by approximately 2.5 million barrels per day. Hardworking Americans in the oil patch are feeling the pain, just like their counterparts in Erbil and Sulaymaniyah. But the solution remains the same. We must continue to support markets by embracing reforms. That's the surest road that any nation has to ignite enough economic growth to provide the revenues it needs to serve its people well. Clearly, market reforms are essential. But for any country or region, there is something else that must happen to ensure prosperity. Simply stated, it must be sovereign and secure. And so, in addition to market reforms, we are also concerned about Iraq's security and sovereignty. And we continue to value our security partnership with the Kurdistan region. Just as it is in federal Iraq, security is critical to attracting foreign investment and unleashing economic development. And so the United States remains a steadfast champion of Iraqi sovereignty and continues to oppose Iran's efforts to undermine it. And while security is essential to economic and energy development, such development in turn can strengthen security further. The more that Kurdistan develops its gas resources and the closer it gets to being a regional energy hub, the less dependent federal Iraq will be on Iranian gas imports. Put another way, energy security can enhance national security. That's why our Department of Energy is proud to be developing a natural gas study for the Kurdistan region, with feedback from all of the region's commercial partners. As we look to the future and to a full recovery from COVID-19, it is our hope that we can build on the momentum with Erbil and Baghdad to realize the full economic potential of the Kurdistan region. The United States government sees this potential, and American companies do as well. They are investing already, and many more are eager to do likewise and ensure Kurdistan's future. Just as it has in the U.S., the future rests on an Iraq that relies on free markets to unleash private investment. So let's keep the momentum going on market-based reforms. Let's work together to build a secure and thriving future. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to address the forum today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Secretary. We do greatly appreciate you spending time with us today and underscoring the importance of our existing energy ties, as well as talking about what the future can hold. And speaking of energy ties, I do have the distinct honor of turning things over to the co-chair of the U.S. Chamber's U.S. Iraq Business Council, Mr. Ross Perot Jr., chairman of the Perot Companies in Hillwood. Ross is joining us from Texas and will offer some brief remarks and then introduce our featured keynote speaker, the Prime Minister of the Kurdistan Regional Government. Thank you, Ross.
Steve, thank you. It's my honor to be with you today at this conference. It's a conference that's very important as we continue to build the relationships with the United States, Iraq, and the Kurds. The U.S. Chamber for decades has played a pivotal role in building these relationships, and today they continue to do so. I started working in Kurdistan in 2006. I was honored to meet the Barzanis when I first came over. I met Mansour and I met his father. That's when we started to invest in Kurdistan. We've invested now over $1.6 billion in Kurdistan. We've had 2 big oil field discoveries. We've hired thousands of people in Kurdistan. We have over 2,100 people working today up in the mountains of Kurdistan as we develop these oil fields. If you look at the members of our team has worked with the Kurds since 1991. General Garner helped liberate the Kurds in 1991. That's how long we've gone back with the Kurds and with the people of Iraq. Our goal is to continue to promote Iraq, to promote the Kurdish region, to continue to build our great friendships as we build and develop these oil fields. We have the potential to continue to double our production. We're at 32,000 barrels. Our goal is to get well over 60,000 barrels in the next few years. And we're doing that also with the help of the U.S. government. I mean, DFC is actually investing in Kurdistan through us. So you're seeing the U.S. government now investing directly into Kurdistan, helping the Kurds build up their economy. It's my honor today to introduce my great friend, Mansour Barzani, a visionary leader of Kurdistan and Iraq. Mr. Prime Minister.
I think I have to start. Thank you, Ross, for your kind introduction. As many of you know, my friend Ross has a long history with the Kurdish people. I first met with him shortly after 2003 under unusual circumstances. We were at war, helping Americans and Iraqis remove a vicious dictator. Our immediate future inside Iraq increasingly uncertain, and the hopes of generations of Kurds tied to getting right the relationship with the international community. It wasn't easy, and though Iraq was never far from the news, my message to Ross was simple: invest in Kurdistan's future. And it's in that spirit that we meet here today. Only this time, Ross and other friends are helping me encourage other Americans to join us on this journey. Before I go further, I want to thank the organizers, in particular, Steve Lutz and Bayan Khan, for bringing us together today. I also want to thank colleagues from the U.S. government for joining, including Deputy Secretary of Energy, Mark Menezes, Ambassador Matthew Tuller, Joey, David, Rob, and the team in Erbil. I also want to thank Ambassador Farid Yassin for being with us. And of course, I welcome the many Americans and Kurdish companies gathered here by the U.S. and Kurdish Chambers of Commerce. You have the potential to strengthen an already strong relationship, a relationship that grew in earnest in the 1990s when the comfort of U.S. air patrol restored hopes for our people. It gave us an opportunity to rebuild the thousands of villages destroyed by the former regime and restore the dynamism of the Kurdish people, and embark on a journey to undo mindset of dependency purposefully engineered by the former regime. And on a day like this, I think it's fitting that we pause for a moment to reflect on our progress. The United States and Kurdistan have a decade-long partnership. In 2021, we will mark 30 years since Operation Provide Comfort spawned our modern relationship. In recent years, our soldiers and security forces have worked in partnership to combat terrorism and protect our countries and our ways of life from shared threats. We are indebted to these heroic men and women for keeping us safe and free. Their sacrifice is what has helped Kurdistan today remain as one of the most stable, safe, and prosperous regions in Iraq and even the Middle East and beyond. Businesses, local and foreign, can operate here knowing that the government and security forces provide a safe and secure environment. But the U.S. Kurdistan relationship goes far beyond security and defense. For many years now, mutually beneficial partnerships have continued to emerge and transform this relationship. Many major U.S. brands have found a profitable market in our region, creating thousands of jobs, teaching vital skills, and in doing so, improving lives. So I am delighted to join you today because it allows me to underline the commitment of my government to supporting high-quality foreign investment in Kurdistan region of Iraq, particularly from the United States. And we are making it easier to unlock the potential quickly. My government has begun a series of far-reaching reforms across a wide range of areas and sectors. The changes are transformational. We are working hard to diversify our economy through privatization of parts of agriculture and electricity sectors. We are making it easier to do business by digitizing important aspects of our government. We are strengthening tax laws, a better harness revenues, and ensure everyone pays their fair share. We are also streamlining the business of doing business by modernizing our banking sector. Introducing best practice technology is a major part of all of this, and one where I particularly welcome U.S. expertise. Hydrocarbons will remain essential components of the KRG's economic output. I am pleased to announce recent progress Secretary Dan Brouillette and I have made on a number of fronts in this sector to unlock greater U.S. investors. We welcome international investment in all sectors of our economy, from healthcare and education to green energy, manufacturing, and agriculture. My government is also working to reduce red tape to ensure that foreign investors are able to complete necessary procedures more quickly and more easily, from company registration to visa regulations and permits. The Board of Investment is playing a key role in reviewing and updating our investor-friendly legislations. This means licenses issued more quickly, registration procedures streamlined, and the potential for foreign investment opportunities most easily highlighted. During this cabinet, more than 70 licenses have been awarded with an investment value of almost $2 billion. This is all part of this cabinet's reform promise, as outlined in particular in the reform law passed at the beginning of this year. We are clamping down on corruption. We have brought more certainty to our public payroll by reducing benefit fraud. Our extensive digitalization agenda will ensure that government will deliver public services more efficiently and effectively. These processes will improve the speed and quality of decision-making, and a digital financial management system has already been introduced to bring much-needed saving and accountability to public spending, ensuring that payments are made swiftly and accurately. This week, in fact, we expect to sign a major deal that will be the basis for our digital transformation agenda, bringing public and government services to the fingertips of citizens, businesses, and government bodies. We are also working hard to ensure that our relationship with the federal government in Baghdad is fair and delivers real outcomes. This is not always straightforward, and we have our differences. But I am committed to resolving our outstanding issues, including around the carriage's share of the federal budget, ensuring that all rights and duties are respected and acknowledged in line with the Constitution. Kurdistan is the ideal gateway for American investors into Iraq and the rest of the Middle East. We have a young, dynamic, and highly educated workforce. More young Kurdistanis are now in higher education than ever before. Our young people are digitally literate and innovative. English is widely spoken, as well, of course, as Kurdish and Arabic. My goal is not only to give our people much-needed jobs, but to provide them the tools necessary to unlock their entrepreneurial spirit. That's the only way Kurdistan can grow. We are a safe haven in a region short uncertainty, and we are committed to religious, ethnic, and cultural diversity. Like the United States, we believe ensuring individual freedom is essential to political and economic success. I would like to spend a few minutes discussing several sectors of our economy that I believe are particularly ripe for foreign investment today. Agriculture can once again become a vital part of Kurdistan's economy, a region that was once called the breadbasket of Iraq. Indeed, what is now Kurdistan was once one of the first places in human history to develop agriculture. Today, our region is hoping to reach economic self-sufficiency in the next 5 years and to become an exporter to other markets in Iraq and across our borders. With the right investment and policies, this can be achieved. Kurdistan region benefits from plentiful arable land and fertile soil, a conducive climate, generations of agricultural expertise, and plentiful water resources. We are taking steps to reduce public sector interference, open it up for more investment and diversification, and support our farmers. And we are working hard to update and improve our agricultural infrastructure through the latest modern technology and expertise. I also believe that there are huge opportunities in Kurdistan region's infrastructure development. We are expanding our green energy supply with more and more hydro and solar power generation. We hope to become a regional hub for gas production and storage, with plans to export to other parts of Iraq and beyond. Our existing electricity infrastructure is being renewed, with new power plants, dams, solar power plants being built and commissioned. Soon, I hope we will be able to guarantee all our citizens electricity generation 24 hours a day. We are now exporting electricity to other parts of Iraq, delivering for people beyond our region. we are investing in improving our roads and other transport infrastructure. We are investing in improving our roads and other transport infrastructure. In the last few months alone, and in spite of the financial constraints imposed by the coronavirus, I have been proud to take part in the opening of numerous new bridges, roads, and expressways. This too has been made possible through public-private partnership. These major infrastructure projects bring real benefits to the people of Kurdistan, creating jobs and improving lives, and facilitating trade. But they also present, I believe, attractive opportunities for foreign investors to do business in our region. The whole world faces unprecedented challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has tested the infrastructure in Kurdistan as it has in the US and globally. But I hope that soon, in 2021, the world will be able slowly to return to normal, that a vaccine or many vaccines will provide to be as successful as recent tests suggest, and that we will be able to once again to meet in person, to travel, and to engage in face-to-face business dealings. When that moment comes, I hope that many of you will take the opportunity to visit Kurdistan for the first time, or to return after many months or years away, to see for yourselves the changes that are being brought about in Kurdistan by this government and our people. In closing, I hope this conference will bring US and Kurdish businesses closer together and help to identify opportunities across the entire range of our economy to help realize the vast potential in the Kurdistan region. For those that are looking at our region for the first time, I encourage you to speak to those who have already invested, to hear from them the successes that can be made and the potential for growth. I also encourage those based in the US to contact the KRG representation in Washington for further information, or to contact directly the Kurdistan Board of Investment. I wish you all a productive and enjoyable conference over the next couple of days, and look forward to seeing many of you in person soon. Thank you all very much.
Prime Minister Barzani, it is wonderful to see you, and I have to thank you for your comprehensive and ranging remarks, and of course, your leadership for sharing a vision of a diversified economy that draws on your existing strengths in energy, but also looking to invest in that wider field. We really do appreciate your thoughts on all of that, and I hope that the Chamber is committed to this and will be a partner, as we have been in your reform agenda, to working to attract more investment in commerce in the U.S. private sector. So thank you very much for sharing those keynote remarks. You've been kind enough to offer to take a couple of questions, and I did want to ask if we could drill down a little bit more. Under your leadership, you clearly do want to continue to build out and draw upon that energy sector and in the existing relationships, but you also speak very wisely about, I think, a diversified economy. If you could share with us, what would be your priorities for that diversification effort?
Well, thank you, Steve. You're right. We are trying to diversify our economy, as I have mentioned at the beginning of this cabinet. Of course, energy will remain to be one of the most important sectors of revenue for the KRG, but we are also looking at how we can expand and improve agriculture, industry, and also tourism. So these are the three main areas that we are very closely watching to improve and develop. In addition to this, of course, we plan to improve our education and health sector in the KRG as part of this cabinet's plan.
Well, that's excellent. And I would say, echoing your message, we look forward to the day when we can do this in person again and perhaps break bread and enjoy some maskoof and see one another in person. So we very much look forward to that. I also just want to ask you, in parting, if there's one kind of top line message that you wanted to share with American companies and investors, what would that message be?
Well, Kurdistan is friend of the United States. Kurdistan is open for business. It's relatively speaking safe, and its investment law is very attractive. So I would really encourage all of our American friends to look at the opportunities that are here in Kurdistan to come and invest in Kurdistan, which I'm sure at the end will benefit both people of Kurdistan and the people of the United States.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you so very much for making time to be with us today. Thank you for your leadership and all that you're doing to deepen and grow the relationship with the U.S. private sector. We do greatly appreciate that and really do appreciate your vision. So thank you very much. And please stay healthy, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our program so far. We certainly enjoyed hearing from His Excellency Prime Minister Barzani. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from three seasoned and impressive diplomats. His Excellency Dr. Safin Dizay, Head of the Department of Foreign Relations in the Kurdistan Regional Government. His Excellency Dr. Fareed Yassin, Iraq's ambassador to the United States, and the Honorable Matthew Tuller, the United States top envoy and ambassador to Iraq. You're not going to want to miss their conversation, so please stay with us. Thank you.
Okay. 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 Thanks for telling me. Okay. All right. Bye.
I haven't seen so many suits in a long time.
I'm just going to type the question rather than say it out loud.
You're live, gentlemen.
Okay. Should we start? We're still missing Kaksafin.
You're live now. Please start.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I am delighted to be moderating this panel with three top of their class diplomats that represent Washington, Baghdad, and Erbil. My name is Bilal Wahab. I'm the Wagner Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. And with me today are Ambassador Matt Tuller, U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, Ambassador Farid Yassin, Iraqi Ambassador to Washington, and His Excellency Safin Dizai, who is the KRG Minister of Foreign Relations. Today, we will be continuing to set the stage for the remainder of this conference following the statement by the KRG Prime Minister and the U.S. Deputy Energy Secretary to look at how Iraq can weather yet another storm, but with a particular focus on how to make Iraq more attractive to both domestic investment, but also foreign direct investment, at least make it less repellent. And with that, I will turn to Minister Safin is with us. Kak Safin, are you with us? Well, in that case, I will turn to you, Ambassador Tuller, to ask you perhaps a broad question. You have a significant experience in a turmoil Iraq of the past of the past few years, dealing with a multitude of issues. Having led specifically the strategic dialogue, which breathed life again into a relationship that was at some point becoming quite precarious, and resetting that trajectory toward a more positive trajectory. Could you comment on how to make Iraq more attractive to American business? Given the assistance and the advice that the US government has given to subsequent Iraqi governments, what do you think works? What kind of messages can you get across to the Iraqi government? And I guess you can also comment on what doesn't work and therefore should be avoided in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Bilal, and of course, thank you to Steve, everybody at the U.S. Iraq Business Council and the Chamber for creating this opportunity for us to come together. Certainly, extremely important issues. The U.S. partnership with Iraq, of course, is based on strategic mutual interest, and those interests are rooted in security and economic prosperity. As we've gone through this period of turmoil, of course, for the U.S., our focus has been on trying to help to establish institutions of governance that promote stability, promote sovereignty, and prosperity. This is challenging, of course, but because of the ongoing efforts that we're making, and I think particularly the process that we have laid out over the past 6 months that culminated in the strategic dialogue sessions that were held in June in Washington, and then in August, and now are making up a series of working groups. As I look at sort of the big picture, in my mind, much of this is really rooted in the question of prosperity. That in fact, so many of the security problems that we face, the governance, the corruption, are rooted in the lack of opportunities for economic growth and prosperity. From the U.S. perspective, what we believe we can bring, because it is an area of expertise of the United States and long experience, is really helping to develop the conditions for a thriving private sector. You mentioned, of course, that there are many obstacles to outside investment in Iraq. And I think this really goes to what are the obstacles, and they exist across a range of issues. I find repeatedly that there is a deficit in sort of the economic literacy, private sector entrepreneurship fields within Iraq. I'm encouraged as I see that in the educational field, private universities, most notably in the Kurdish region, but also potentially as we see some of these in Baghdad and elsewhere in the country, that are more and more focused on trying to imbue in young Iraqis the skills that in fact are in demand by private sector companies. That's a very, very important part of that. But likewise, within the ministries, within the political elite, there also is a deficit in economic literacy and understanding of what it takes for a private sector to thrive. In ongoing conversations with senior figures in ministries, with members of the Council of Representatives, representatives of political parties, I'm often struck at how little understanding there really is of what it actually takes for a private sector enterprise to succeed. And in fact, at times there's almost a hostility or an air of suspicion that is brought, that something is wrong if a company is making a profit in Iraq. That must be somehow taking money that rightfully belongs to the Iraqi people. It's going to be a long and I think arduous road to begin to change some of that, but I'm encouraged as I see that amongst young people, increasingly there's more interest in pursuing opportunities in the private sector rather than in the public sector. So those are kind of the comments that I'd start with and turn it back to you to follow up with our distinguished fellow panelists.
Thank you, Ambassador Tuller. Turning to you, Ambassador Farid Yassin. Today's headlines describe the relation between the Kurdistan region and the federal Iraqi government in disagreement, adversarial tone. Does it have to be that way? The disputes over oil management, revenue management, the budget, the customs. Does the economic relation has to also be adversarial, like the politics has been? If asked differently, what does Iraq mean? What does the KRG or the Kurdistan region mean to federal Iraq economically?
Hello, Bilal. Thank you for sharing this. Hello, Matthew, my good friend from Baghdad. And I want to thank the organizers for offering us this opportunity to speak about these very timely issues. Let me backtrack a little, if you don't mind. I would like to echo everything that Matt said regarding the attitude of people with regard to the private sector in Iraq. I hate to revisit the past, but it's sometimes necessary to remind people that we were subjected to 40 years of forced socialist thinking that has trickled down into the psyche of people. Most Iraqi civil servants now, just as Matthew Tuller mentioned, look adversarially at the private sector, so that the kind of relationships they have with them is negotiations over a zero-sum game, and that's also something that we have with our international partners, an attitude that is always geared towards zero-sum game negotiations. I think we have to go beyond that and to always look for win-win situations that can broaden the envelope of what we can bring to each other. That being said, the problems that we have, again, have to do with the fact that most of our revenue, most of the income of the state comes from oil. We don't have any other resources like a thriving private sector that can compensate for all of this. So long as we had high oil prices and excess revenue and more money than to know what to do with, things were sort of okay. But as soon as things got tighter, well, you have to do things a little differently. And so sometimes the discussions get adversarial. What complicates this as well, and this is an important point, is that the way we do our finances in Iraq is closer to that of the 19th century than to that of the 20th century. There is very little transparency because there is very little computerization. One of the things that people forget is the deep impact that the sanctions of the 1990s had over Iraq. In the 1990s is when most of the banking systems across the world went electronic and were linked to the internet. This is something that we have missed out on, and we are trying to catch up, but it's sometimes not all that easy. I think many of the issues that you raised, Bilal, can be resolved if we try to exercise, both at the federal level and at the regional level, some greater dose of communications and transparency. And I'm actually hopeful that this would happen. I would like to point out that discussions between the center and the region are ongoing.
Ambassador Yassin, can I follow up on that, tying the economics to the politics? We have an election next year in Iraq.
Hopefully.
Do you think that do you think Iraqi politics has matured enough where we can have platforms that don't invite you to vote for them based on their ethnic or religious identity, but rather focused on issues and not just necessarily vote for me because I'll be less bad than those in government, but perhaps promoting some of these fundamental reforms that the Iraqi economy, the Kurdish economy needs. Do you think the politics has matured to that level where elections can at least be partially about issues?
Well, the politics will have to mature, if I may say so. About a year ago, throughout the south of Iraq, to a lesser degree also elsewhere in Iraq, we had protests that were very, very active, sometimes dealt with wrongly and violently by the authorities. But the main thrust of these protests was a discourse that went beyond sectarianism, went beyond identity voting, went beyond narrow interests, and also a call to clean up shop by invoking the need to fight corruption as an imperative for the country. So I will say that the politics will have to follow suit and take care and address these issues that have been requested by everybody during the protests that we have seen about a year ago. And I have to tell you that I know that the government is taking serious steps, at least with regard to corruption and as you know, with regard to the elections, and there I have to give credit to our international partners. Everything's being set up to have free and fair elections in which all Iraqis participate.
Bayan Khan, thank you for joining us. I'll be pointing the questions about the KRG to you. I understand that Kasafin is having some technical difficulties. When the COVID pandemic hit, the KRG was already in a financial crunch, so it really exacerbated an existing crisis, making it probably a twin-headed snake, and further slowed down the recovery from ISIS and all the rebuilding that needs, and in the case of the KRG, some of the aftermath of the referendum. But the KRG has seen crises before, and at some point, it did follow the maxim of never allowing a crisis to go to waste. How is this one different from past crises? Is this too big for the Kurdish resilience, or is it still manageable for the Kurdish government given where it is today?
Thank you very much, Kag Bilal, and it's an honor to join two great ambassadors. And also, I want to express our very profound apologies to Kag Sefin Dezay. We have been trying to connect him, but have not been able to do so. So I'm a very unworthy understudy for him. With regards to your question, well, first of all, I am an optimist. So I do believe in Kurdish resilience. I do believe we will overcome this challenge. It is very, very tough. It comes so soon after the challenges that we had with the economy after 2014. As you said, ISIS came, suddenly we had a 1,000-kilometer front line to defend, nearly 2 million refugees and IDPs for our population to take care of, and at the time, a fall in oil prices. So we already had that shock just a few years ago, and just as we were picking ourselves up off the ground, here we have COVID-19 impacting the global economy, which then impacts the demand for oil, which then impacts Kurdistan and Iraq's economy. But as I said, I am an optimist. I believe in that bright yellow happy sun that sits in the middle of our flag, that it represents our resilience and our ability to come back. I do think there is opportunity in the terrible situation that we're in. And as I said in my opening remarks earlier today, my heart goes out to anybody who has suffered COVID-19 or has lost a loved one. But there is an opportunity for our government, and I dare say for Baghdad as well, use this opportunity to bring about reforms. This is the time when we need to show our commitment, our steadfastness in implementing reforms and remaining committed. And I think we heard from Prime Minister Masroor Barzani earlier, that is exactly what this cabinet intends to do.
Thank you, Bayan Khan. Ambassador Tuller, you highlighted the importance of prosperity and education. And I believe that in terms of educating the Iraqi market, nothing works better than giving them case studies and examples. How much does U.S. business contribute to offering that public education, to the value of what good, solid, corruption-free CEOs that are afraid of FCPA can teach the Iraqi businesses, but also those in government? How much does the presence of U.S. business contribute to the kind of reforms that otherwise would require the education of a generation to achieve?
Yeah, a great question. I think the honest answer is, of course, the potential is very, very far from being realized. While we do have, and I think there is a strong support for having U.S. companies, not only because of the often the technology, the sort of expertise that the U.S. companies bring, but actually a recognition that the presence of U.S. companies is a powerful signal that, in fact, as you mentioned, U.S. companies won't and can't engage in any practices that are corrupt or that undermine the institutions of government. But when you look at actually on the ground, the number of U.S. companies, investors, it's really quite small in terms of the size of the overall economy. Mm-hmm. We all recognize, of course, that Iraq's economy is very, very much built on the vast hydrocarbon energy resources that Iraq has. And that is a blessing and a curse. Enlightened policies in some countries have been able to overcome the downside of dependence on one commodity or resource. But it takes tremendous political will and help. And we think that as we bring in more U.S. companies, and obviously there are U.S. companies that have been able to participate in the energy sector, mm-hmm. but really I don't think that goes far enough. The energy sector creates relatively few jobs for the amount invested. I think, in fact, Iraqis sometimes overlook the great potential in this country. The size of the population, a population that is famously hardworking, disciplined, educated, forward-looking. The diversity of the population that brings in energy and an ability to create new opportunities, make the pie larger rather than the zero-sum game. I look at some of the areas, and I think both in the Iraqi Kurdish region and in the federal region, Iraq's history of agriculture is, of course, famous for having created so much of the wealth of the country, and yet now I think that's vastly underinvested, and vast potential for investment to bring more value to the agriculture sector. Likewise, education, I think, is one, as we see U.S. companies willing to invest in the educational sector. I think that U.S. companies could bring an awful lot to bear in healthcare and the health field. And again, that in the 21st century is going to be creating a lot of jobs. Of course, there's other areas, I think, that as the obstacles that currently exist to investment, primarily overcoming some of those areas that don't create adequate financial returns. If those can be overcome, I see the potential in the next 5 to 10 years to really begin to then create the beneficial cycle of more outside investment, bringing in a different atmosphere that then begins to change the overall climate for investment. Over.
Ambassador Yassin, you highlighted the complementarity between federal Iraq and its Kurdish region, and perhaps the opportunities for both sides competing to the top rather than engaging in whataboutism and blame games. But how do you think both sides can get there? I understand that the Iraqi government, the current finance minister, put together or put forward a white paper that addresses, perhaps for the first time boldly, some of the structural challenges that arriving at the level of prosperity that Ambassador Tula refers to. So where do you see the realization of kind of a win-win that you also alluded to earlier? Is there a realization that that kind of win-win in the economic term perhaps is possible, and won't be encumbered by the political disputes?
Well, thank you, Dr. Bilal, for putting your finger on a critical issue. First off, you mentioned the Minister of Finance. We have a new Minister of Finance, and nobody can accuse him of not knowing what the economy is all about. He's extremely experienced. In fact, he is a credit to the country. And so he and his team, including, I should say, the new head of the Investment Commission, are people with solid private sector experience who can steer Iraq and point out the issues that their predecessors were not aware of because they lacked the experience. And this can be done. You know, we need to develop a new class of entrepreneurs, a new class of businessmen that had over the last 20, 30, 40 years had withered. And I think it's possible. And I think American businesses can play a critical role in doing this. And I'll use the American press as an example. If you recall, under the previous regime, there was absolutely no free press. You couldn't even own a personal typewriter or distribute papers. Everything was limited to what the government was doing. When regime change happened, American newspapers came in. They had resources. They had to hire people. Eventually, the Iraqis that they hired moved from being fixers to being proper journalists. And some of them, in fact, now work in very important positions in newspapers across the country, and in fact, in the United States. I'll give you an example. When Don Graham decided to sell the Washington Post he gathered the people, the staff of the Washington Post, and explained to them why he was selling it to Jeff Bezos. And the first person he recognized in the audience was, of course, Ben Bradley. But the second group of people that he recognized were the Iraqi employees of the Washington Post, who had done such a great job, reporting from Iraq. So American businesses can follow the same model, hire Iraqis, create joint ventures, and really transform the economy of the country. And we can very probably do it in short order. Now, on the complementarity of the regions of Iraq, anybody who visits Kurdistan and then visits Baghdad or south of Baghdad will notice that there's a huge difference in climate, in geography. Kurdistan can be, a winter paradise. It would be, in fact, the closest skiing area to, for example, the Persian Gulf. So there is huge complementarity. I have to point out that the people in Kurdistan are extremely capable. We've seen that. In fact, I can tell you that I learned some of my trade by watching my bosses, Hoshar Zabari, Fuad Hussein, including my good friend Safim Dizay, do their job. So I'm pretty hopeful that we can overcome the difficulties that we have at the present time.
Thank you, Ambassador Yassin. I see that Taksafin is back with us. So Taksafin, I had a lot of questions for you. I shot a couple of them at Bayan Khan. So in the 2 minutes or minute and a half that I have left, let me ask you probably like a two-in-one question. The KRG diplomacy has been quite stellar in selling Kurdistan to international business and deploying it quite effectively. And I think it's a testament that Kurdistan started producing 500,000 barrels of oil within a few years. So looking into the future, how does KRG diplomacy, an effort that you are leading in the current cabinet, is going to contribute to attracting more investment and perhaps beyond the oil and gas sector on one hand, and while you attract foreign and regional investors into Kurdistan, how is that impacted by your relationship with Baghdad? How does the new KRG government see the rest of Iraq? We cannot hear the Minister Safin.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you very much. I'm sure Bayan did a good job in my absence. In fact, we believe whether within present status of Kurdistan region being part of Iraq or otherwise, we still believe that Baghdad is a strong component, and probably it's an area that both Erbil and Baghdad can do a lot of business together. We believe that we can complement each other. And I believe the fact that we have had this vision of an open market economy, and we have actually embarked on that since early 2003 post-regime change. Of course, there are many areas that needs to be looked into seriously by changing certain rules. Iraq as a whole, in the old days, being more of a socialist system whereby the state was the mentor, the state is the big brother. From cradle to grave, everything had to be provided by the state. Therefore, there are times when we have investors coming in, right from the very top, they are being given the green light. But when they go down, there are many regulations and red tape and laws that needs to be amended because they are still of the old days. Therefore, we need to provide a much more healthy environment than it is now by changing some of these laws and regulations. And Kurdistan can be a hub. And as we have, as you said very clearly and rightly, we have been able, under all the challenges, to market our oil. And we are in serious negotiation with Baghdad to resolve this pending file, which has been there for quite some time. And I believe we have covered good ground. And the current government, in its first day of the formation, the following day they visited Baghdad. And there has been a dozen visits to Baghdad over the last 18 months. So I believe there's a good opportunity for us to cooperate more and more with Baghdad in order to enhance our relation, not only on political security level, but also to help each other with the development of our economy. But of course, in order to do that, there are certain things that the federal government has to do in terms of the banking system. Whilst we are promoting for direct foreign investment to come to Kurdistan and Iraq, we need to have a proper banking system in place, which would be regulated by the central bank, but it should be independent. Instead of government or Ministry of Finance controlling the banks and lending money to investors, we need to have proper high street banks, investor banks, in order that people would be able to borrow. And even to consolidate the position of the banking system if and when they are part of the international banking system. In times of crisis, not only within Iraq, but also on the international level, they would be able to consolidate their position. In Kurdistan, we believe that we have come a long way, but still there's a lot to be learned. And I believe on such platforms and by inviting experts in the field, by opening our doors and by creating a much more positive environment and the reforms that we have introduced. And in addition to that, the aim and the goal to utilize the resources from the oil, hopefully in future, at the moment, perhaps we are not able to do that, but to utilize the revenues from the oil in order to invest in other fields, such as the agriculture and agro-industry. Traditionally, Kurdistan region has been known a region that has been producing, not only for Kurdistan, but for all of Iraq. And I think we can return to those days where we can be producers and even to export rather than just be consumers and import.
Thank you, Kaksafin. Ambassador Tuller, I'm struck how you and Kaksafin agreed on the importance of agribusiness, and I couldn't, personally agree more, because unlike the oil and gas sector, which is capital intensive, the agribusiness sector is labor intensive, and job creation is definitely a goal that both the Iraqi government and the Kurdish government need to address the youth faults that they go through. The United States, in addition to having businesses that act as role model, and I think Ambassador Yassin gave a very good example in the press and the media industry. Could you comment on how the United States manages or looks into assisting both the Iraqi government and the KRG in developing the software, the levers of their economies on one hand, but perhaps also in sorting out or mediating the many disputes that have come up? Is the United States interested in injecting itself in that mediation beyond just encouraging both sides to come up with, a revenue sharing law, hydrocarbons law, a fair and equitable budget law? So 2 in 1 for you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm glad Safin also mentioned the financial sector, because a lot of what we're talking about really requires a further development of a financial sector. And again, I would argue, I think without exaggeration, that there really aren't any other countries in the world that have the same level of experience, expertise, ability to develop financial instruments. But again, this is a challenge, I think, and will be critical to the second part of your question, because again, we need to make sure that the economies of the IKR and the federal Iraq are both able to proceed in lockstep in creating the environment and overcoming the obstacles to the outside investment. I don't think that there is necessarily a role for the U.S. in formal mediation. That's not really necessary. The Iraqi federal model is one that we believe in strongly, and it provides the political mechanisms to resolve disputes. And I hope that going forward, we'll see those mechanisms further mature. Obviously, we do want to see the current issues that are plaguing the financial relationship between Baghdad and Erbil overcome. We've been told that a long-term budget sharing agreement with Erbil will be codified in upcoming legislation, including for a 2021 budget. We're hopeful that all sides will be able to reach a cooperative, mutually beneficial arrangement, because this is obviously, and having long-term solutions to this are going to be necessary for outside investors to feel confidence that there are incentives for them to come and do business in Iraq. Over.
Ambassador Yassin, a last word from you.
Well, this is a business council meeting, if you will. I want to stress the important role that American businesses can help play in transforming Iraq's economy and Iraq's businesses. We have a huge reliance on the energy sector, but the energy sector worldwide is going to change precisely because of the effect of climate change, which is something that we are feeling. I would like to remind people, last July, there was a scary article in the Washington Post talking about the record temperatures we had in Baghdad exceeding 126 degrees Fahrenheit. So we need to prepare for this transformation that will impact the energy sector by reviving by transforming our energy sector, by bringing in new energies, by transforming our construction codes, in fact, by transforming our whole economy. And I appeal to the United States businesses, because of all the major countries that we deal with, the United States is the only one that has climates or local climates that resemble those of Iraq, so that the proposals or the propositions or suggestions or solutions that they offer in situ in the United States can be adapted most easily to Iraq. That's my last word.
Thank you. To Bayan Khan and Kak Safin, on the question of leaders with the right vision for the economy and perhaps the positive attitude, at least not antithetic attitude toward market. How do you see the current crop of Kurdish leaders? They're well educated. They have more street cred than mountain cred than the previous generation of Kurdish freedom fighters. So what do you think the current crop of leaders' attitude toward economic development, toward market, toward deregulation is headed? And are they going to invest further in allowing the government a greater amount or greater tools and levers to manage the economy?
I think it's important to acknowledge what has been achieved so far, because in the energy sector in particular, whether it is oil and gas, but also electricity, these are all have been more or less framed in the private sector's direct investment. In the past, we used to have 3, 4, 5 hours maximum of electricity, but since 2007 and 2008, we have encouraged the private sector, and much of the power stations are actually privately owned. Billions of dollars have been invested in that, including the infrastructure of the oil and gas sector. The government has not spent a penny on that sector. It's all private sector, be it local, national, or international companies. And also the fact that the government's policy right from the beginning has been very supportive of entrepreneurship and private-public partnership. These are areas that we have concentrated on, and we want to develop it further. But as I said, there are certain regulations and laws that needs to be amended to make the operation much more smoother.
Bayan Khan, last question to you before we close. As the KRG's representative...
Kak Bilal, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I really encourage you to ask Kak Safin, since this is his panel. So please go ahead.
Okay. So Kak Safin, I'm going to then ask you the question I was going to ask Bayan Khan, and then with this we close. When you talk to foreign businesses, in particular American businesses, what are the top 2 to 3 questions that they ask you?
Naturally, any investors, wherever they may be, they are always cautious, and they do not want to take risk. Although any investment anywhere in the world, there are certain risk factors. But of course, in this part of the world, and when people have absolutely no knowledge of the region and what they see pictures on TV, the volatile region and bombings and whatever, always it's bad news that makes the headlines. So of course they're asking for certain guarantees, and they're asking for the laws that would protect them. And these are areas which is mostly has been raised, and also the potential for developing the market. And we reassure them that the investment law that we have, it is very friendly, although there's a package to revise it and to make it more friendly, because this was it's about 12 years old, so we want to develop it further. But in addition to that, we try to convince any investor that they should not only see the markets of Kurdistan. Kurdistan can be a hub for various and obvious reasons today, but Kurdistan can be a springboard for the rest of Iraq, of 35 million population, and I would say even beyond Iraqi borders.
A lot to unpack. Thank you for sharing your insights, your expertise. With that, we conclude this panel with U.S. Ambassador to Washington, Matthew Tuller, Iraq's Ambassador to, U.S. Ambassador to Baghdad, Matthew Tuller, Baghdad's ambassador in Washington, Ambassador Farid Yassin, KRG's ambassador to Washington, Bayan Khan, and KRG Minister of Foreign Relations, Safin Dizay. Thank you all very much for sharing your insights, for answering these questions, and a lot to chew on, a lot to think about, which I'm sure that the rest of the conference will be getting to the specific sectors and issues in more detail, but we tried to set the scene for the remainder of the conference. Thank you all very much. This concludes this panel. See you next.
Thanks a lot.
بەڕێزان ئەم کاتتان باش مایە خۆشحالیمانە ئیمڕۆ لەم کۆبوونەوە ڤیدیۆیە لەگەڵتان ئامادە بن. سەرەتا سوپاسی بەڕێز ستیڤ لۆتسجێگری سەرۆکی ژووری بازرگانی ئەمریکا بۆ کاروباری ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست و نوێنەری حکوومەتی هەرێمی کوردستان لە وڵاتە یەکگرتووەکانی ئەمریکا بەڕێز قات و بەیان سامی عەبدوڕەحمان دەکەم بۆ ڕەخساندنی ئەم بۆنەیە کە ئێمە بە زۆر گرنگی هەژمار دەکەین و هەروە سوپاسی کۆمپانیا بەشداربووەکانی ئەمریکا دەکەم.
Good time, dears. It's a pleasure for me to participate in this webinar with you. First, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Steve Lotus, the Vice President of American Chamber of Commerce for Middle East Affairs, as well as the representative of Kurdistan Regional Government in USA, Ms. Sami Abdulrahman, for offering this event as we count it significantly. I would like to say thanks for American participated companies as well.
بەڕێزان ئێمە وەک یەکێتی ژوورەکانی بازرگانی پیشەسازی هەرێمی کوردستان لە مانگی حوزەیرانی ساڵی 2019 یادەشتنامەیەکی لێک تێگەیشتنمان لەگەڵ ژووری بازرگانی ئەمریکا واژوور کرد بۆ هاندان و بەرەو پێشبردننی هاوکاری میوان کۆمەلگەی بزنسی هەردوو لامە و ئاڵوگۆڕکردنی شاندی بازرگانی و هەروە فراوانکردنی تۆڕی بزنس لە نێوانمان بە مەبەستی تونند و تۆڕکردنی هەڵەکانی بزنس.
Your Excellencies, we are, as the Kurdistan Federation of Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in July 2019, we had signed a memorandum of understanding with American Chamber of Commerce for promoting and developing the cooperation between the business communities for both sides, as well as exchanging commercial missions, although to expand the business network between us for the purpose of tightening business opportunities.
بەڕێزان لێرەدا و بامەدەبوونی ئەم بەڕێزانە پابەندی خۆمان دووپات دەکەینەوە بە ناوەڕۆکی یادداشتنامەکە بەو هیوایەی هاوکاری نێوانمان بتەوتر بێت لە پەروەژەندی ئاوەدانکردنەوەی کوردستان و کۆمەلگەی بزنسی هەردوو لامە.
Dears, Hereby, and with the attendance of these excellencies, we confirm our readiness to the content of our memorandum. We hope we will be able to promote our contribution together for the interest of rehabilitation of Kurdistan as well as the business community of both sides.
لێرەدا دەمەوێت ئاماژە و دەستخۆشی لە کۆمپانیا ئەمریکیەکان بکەم کە لە هەرێمی کوردستان کار دەکەن لە هەمان کاتدا هانی کۆمپانیا ئەمریکیەکان دەدەم بێن لە کوردستان کاری بازرگانی و بەرهێنان بکەن چونکە ژینگەی کارکردن لەبارە و ئاسایش بەرقەرار.
Hereby, I would like to appreciate and thank American companies whom are working in Kurdistan region. At the same time, I would like to encourage American companies to come to Kurdistan for the purpose of doing business and investment in Kurdistan, because the atmosphere of Kurdistan is proper for business and, of course, it's secure and stable.
و هەروە وەک یەکێتی ژوورە بازرگانیەکان هەموو جۆرە هاوکاری و ئاسانکاریان پێشکەش دەکەین و چاومان لەوەیە کە کۆمپانیا ئەمریکیەکان ڕۆلی سەرەکی بجێڕن لە ئاوادانکردنەوە و بنیاتنانی کوردستان بۆ ماوەی درێژخایەک.
As the Federation of Chamber of Commerce, we will provide all kinds of facilitation, and we look forward American companies to play a great and a main role in rehabilitation and the construction of Kurdistan for a long term.
بواری بزنس لە کوردستان فراوانە و سێکتەرەکانی نەوت و سامانە سروشتیەکان و هەروە پیشەسازی وزە و کشت و کاڵ و پیشەسازی خۆراک تەندەروستی پەروەردە فێرکردن بانک و هەتا دوایی لە خۆ دەگرێت.
There are a variety of business sector in Kurdistan. The sectors include oil, natural resources, industry, energy, agriculture, food industry, health, education, and learning, banking, and etc.
بەمەبەستی بەهێزکردنی ئابووری کوردستان ئاراستەمان بەرەو هەمان سەرچینکردنی سەرچاوە ئابووریەکانە کە کوردستان دەوڵەمەندە لەم بارەیەوە.
Actually, for the purpose of empowering Kurdistan economy, our directions are toward varieties of economy resources that Kurdistan is rich on it.
لێرەدا دەمەوێت پشتوانی ژوورە بازرگانی و پیشەسازیەکانی کوردستان دووپات بکەمەوە بۆ بەرنامەی کابینەی نۆیەمی حکوومەتی کوردستان و بەرنامە چاکسازیەکەی کە جێگای ئومێدمانە و زۆر سپاسدان دەکەین و زۆر ئینشاڵڵا سەرکەوتوونە.
I would like to confirm the support of Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Kurdistan Region for the platform of the 9th Cabinet of Kurdistan Regional Government and its reform plan. That is our hope. And thank you very much. And I hope all the success for you all.
وهیوادارم کە لەو بابەتانە بەردەوام بکەین بەڕێی نوێنەراتیمان و برادەرانی ژووری بازرگانی بۆ پەرەپێدان بە هەموو پەیوەندیەکانمان لە داهاتوودا ئینشاڵڵا.
And we hope we continually keep in contact and keep in touch with our colleagues and the representatives. And we are here as a Chamber of Commerce. We confirm our readiness for all kinds of support. Thank you so much.
What?
Yeah, sorry.
Why? Why?
There you are.
Are we on?
I think so. All right, I think we're actually on. I think we started. Great. Well, good morning to those in the United States and those in Iraq. My name is Lisa Podolny, and I'm the Economic Affairs Chief here at the U.S. in Erbil. Hi. Can they hear you? All right. We're live. We can hear you, Dory. Our panel discussion today is going to focus on the topic, why invest in the Kurdistan region? But before we get into our discussion, I want to introduce our panelists and give each of them an opportunity to share a few thoughts about the topic before we start. So joining us today, we have Deputy Assistant Secretary for Iraq Affairs in the Near Eastern Affairs Bureau of the U.S. Department of State, David Copley. We also have the chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce Kurdistan Branch, Duri Abu Zaid. And we also have with us co-founder and director of operations, startup incubator, 51 Labs, Patricia Latif. So maybe Des Copley, I can start with you, and I'll turn the floor over for a few more remarks to start.
Great, thanks so much.
Okay.
So good afternoon to those of you in Kurdistan, and good morning to all my countrymen in the United States.
Okay, because we can't hear what anyone's
It's
saying.
a pleasure to meet with you all virtually here today. Obviously, I wish we could be doing this in person, but hopefully next year in Kurdistan. As someone who came to the State Department directly from the American private sector, it's really great to engage with our business community about commercial opportunities in the Kurdistan region. I was actually in Erbil last month, and I was struck by the eagerness of Kurdish entrepreneurs and the regional government to work with U.S. companies to address their issues. In fact, I understand that after my visit, Prime Minister Barzani actually stood up a task force specifically focused on unraveling some of the bureaucratic obstacles that U.S. companies have traditionally faced in the Kurdistan region. Before we get into the panel discussion, I'd like to start by providing my perspective on 3 key reasons why U.S. companies should consider investing in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. First, the Kurdistan region is a developing market with tremendous commercial potential for those who are willing to put in the work and take on the risk. With 45 billion barrels of oil in reserves, trillions of cubic feet of natural gas, and most importantly, a resilient, hardworking, entrepreneurial population of more than 5 million, there is real opportunity for growth and for profit available in the Kurdistan region. Second, Kurdistan is a place that wants to be open for business. The regional government here is actively engaging with the United States and our allies about how to improve their business climate. For example, we're working together on an e-regulations initiative, which is something I hope we can expand. The Kurdistan region is a place that values tolerance and religious pluralism. And although the Kurdistan region is, of course, part of a unified federal Iraq, this is a much better security environment for business persons than some other parts of the country. Third, the U.S. government wants to see stronger economic ties between the United States and the Iraqi Kurdistan region. We work closely with the Advocacy Center at the Department of Commerce and across the U.S. government to help U.S. companies. This is a difficult time financially for Iraq and for the Kurdistan region, and we should all be clear-eyed about that. But despite the difficulties, there are opportunities out there, and we want to see best-in-class American companies partnering with our friends in the Kurdistan region and helping to build a business climate that will best serve the people of the Iraqi Kurdistan region over the long run. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I look forward to a good and robust discussion.
Thank you, Des Copley. We appreciate those thoughts. Maybe I can turn it over to Patricia next, since it seems we've lost Dory.
Sure, not a problem. Thank you very much for having me. As Lisa mentioned, I am the co-founder and director of operations of 51 Labs. We are the first startup incubator in Iraq and have been operating in the country since 2017. And Des Copley talked a bit about the bigger picture. So we're working on a day-to-day basis with small businesses, startups, really innovative young people. So I'll talk a bit later about the challenges and opportunities, but I think for those who are participating in the discussion today, it's likely to be a lot of larger businesses, but there are a lot of great opportunities to support young Kurdish people. We work with young Kurds, young Syrians, young Iraqis from all over the country and outside who are launching their own businesses. And this entrepreneurial culture is really thriving. And there are a lot of young people interested in launching their own companies. And I think a lot of this has been driven by some of the economic challenges that the region has faced recently, but young people really want to take control of their own futures and address some of the challenges facing Kurdistan and Iraq more broadly, because what is an entrepreneur other than a problem solver? And they're looking for a lot of support. And I'm not just talking financial here. I think in the audience today, we probably have many seasoned and experienced businessmen and women, and they could very much use your support and any, mentorship and tips, any ideas that you have. And we'd be very happy to connect you so you can learn more from these startups.
Great, thanks, Patricia. We appreciate those thoughts. That's really interesting to share about the culture of entrepreneurship in the IKR. Maybe we can take the discussion out just a little bit. I don't know if we have Dory back. I can't see him on the screen. So I guess I'll start, maybe direct a question to Des Copley to start. Maybe you could share a little bit more about what the U.S. government is focused on, particularly in terms of fostering stronger business ties between the United States and the Iraqi Kurdistan region.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in my opening speech, I mean, we think this is really important. We think there's great opportunities for U.S. companies. We think there's great opportunities to improve lives in the Kurdistan region by creating a better business climate. And there's a whole host of U.S. government resources that are available to help American companies do business in the Kurdistan region. So we obviously have our consulate in Erbil. They're always available to talk. For federal issues dealing with federal Iraq, we obviously have our embassy in Baghdad. We have our Department of Commerce Advocacy Center. And then back in Washington, my team, the Iraq desk of the State Department, and also our Department of Energy are always willing to help U.S. companies come and do business successfully in the Kurdistan region.
Thanks, Des Copley. I think we have Dory back, so I'm going to quickly turn it over to him as the president of the American Chamber of Commerce, Kurdistan branch. Dory, maybe you want to share just a few thoughts about the topic, why invest in the Kurdistan region?
Hello, everyone. I apologize about the technical difficulties I had this evening. I'd like to start by wishing all of you and your loved ones healthy and at least have a peace of mind during this period. It's an honor to be part of this distinguished group. I'm Dory Abuzed, the chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce in Kurdistan. I'm also happy to be here, at least to have the opportunity to be able to talk about AmCham Kurdistan. We're a nonprofit organization, non-governmental, nonpartisan, that exists to serve the U.S. and the Kurdish business communities. Our mission is to promote trade and investments between Kurdistan Region of Iraq and the U.S. and serve as the voice of the American business in Kurdistan. Our 2021 goal is to be the most strategic, dynamic, and influential business association in Kurdistan. We want to drive innovation, sustainable growth, and help our members succeed, a community we want people to join. Speaking of joining, we're working very hard to add more members and business representatives. We've restructured our membership dues because we realize the financial setback some companies and some individuals have had to deal with during the pandemics. We're working with local businesses to offer certain discounts to our members to attract more of them. We have revived AmCham. Barbara Abel, our manager, is working diligently to restructure the policies of the organization. And with the support of the U.S. Consulate in Erbil, under the leadership of C.G. Waller. And we're working on restructuring our board. Our members deserve to have a strong board that are motivated to serve and have the ability and passion for the organization. Hopefully that will strengthen our long-term strategy by increasing focus and dedication. We plan to have a public advocacy group to offer the greatest good for the largest number of people. I want to thank Steve Lutz, Anna Beres, the U.S. Iraq Business Council and U.S. Chamber of Commerce for making this event possible. Thank you all. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Dory. Appreciate those thoughts. Maybe Patricia, let's take it off of what Dory was saying in terms of some of the challenges and opportunities that are facing businesses, particularly because you work so closely with very small entrepreneurs. What kind of obstacles are they facing, and what kind of opportunities exist in the market?
Definitely. So to give a bit of context, we're working mostly with startups. They're usually either tech businesses or tech enabled. So for example, businesses like delivery companies, marketplaces, things like this. Some of the challenges that these businesses face really reflect, I think, the broader environment in Kurdistan. So the main one that we really see often is legal and regulatory challenges. So for example, registering a business, especially if you're a startup, can be quite complex. Online don't exist as a designation in the registration. So we have, for example, an online business that has an innovative model. They try and go and register and they're not able to do so. It can also be quite costly, up to $6,000 in some cases for a business to register. There are rules that they have to abide by. They have to have a physical office to register, but a lot of these businesses are operating from home or from our co-working space. They're innovating, and so adapting to some of these regulations can be challenging. Another challenge that we face is that there's a gap in financing for startups. So there's a lot of funding available in the form of grants for early stage businesses, but we have a lot of businesses that are growing and require larger injections of capital, $50,000, $100,000, $500,000, and it can be quite difficult to access loans, nearly impossible. And we don't have any venture capital in Kurdistan. Other challenges include things like cash on delivery is still the norm, which results in some problems, but there really are a lot of opportunities. You have mobile penetration in Kurdistan and Iraq at more than 100%. You have 3G rollout across the country, which is great. And there's a lot of demand for applications and interesting new business ideas. There have been advancements in the banking sector and payment. And the country is really ripe for investment, especially in these startups. These businesses are growing more quickly. They're operating in sectors that are not necessarily traditional. There are lots of innovation, be it in oil and gas or fintech. And we've had a lot of interesting things going on in Kurdistan. I think maybe in an hour or two, you can hear from Yadgar Mirani, who's the founder of Lezu, which is the first startup, the first Kurdistan-based startup to receive a 7-figure seed round. So this was a really big deal, and Kurdistan is really on the map when it comes to startups.
Who put him in touch with us first. I think you met the chamber.
Yeah.
And the council actually uses his services, so it's a great connection. Kind of to play off of what you just said, Patricia, maybe Des Copley, I can ask you, what is the U.S. government doing to help American companies invest in the Iraqi Kurdistan region? What options are out there?
Well, I just mentioned in my previous answer to the question, all the various agencies that are literally standing by to help, starting with our consulate in Erbil. But also, when we had a strategic dialogue in August with the Iraqi government, our Development Finance Corporation was there, our Export-Import Bank was there. There's also folks who are willing to assist with investments where it strategically makes sense. So we see Iraq as a priority. We think if Iraq as a whole does well, it means very good things geopolitically for the region. So we've invested as a government a lot of organizational energy trying to help make sure Iraq progresses towards stability. And all the various elements of the U.S. government are sort of willing to put additional organizational energy behind that to promote our business community in Iraq, because we think that fits into our strategy of helping to stabilize the country and move things in a positive direction.
Great, thanks. Maybe one more question along kind of those lines. I know you mentioned the business process mapping in your kind of opening remarks. Are there other U.S. initiatives to help improve the business environment? How are we working with our Kurdistan regional government partners?
Yeah, so one thing that's been very helpful, I know the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has actually done a lot of great work putting together reports for us in advance of our strategic dialogue of recommendations they have for improving the business climate. And we've brought a lot of those to our partners, both in federal Iraq and also in the Kurdistan region, as recommendations for things they can do to make it better. And on my last trip to Erbil, I was able to talk to the top levels of the Kurdish government about specific complaints from U.S. companies, things they'd like to see to make things easier and facilitate business transactions. And we've definitely seen a seriousness and a willingness to address those problems. As I mentioned earlier, Prime Minister Barzani actually set up a task force to address some of the complaints from U.S. companies to try to make things easier. So we have a partner that wants to engage, wants to make the business climate better, wants investment dollars flowing in, and we hope we can be a bridge between our business community and the Kurdish government in trying to make some of those positive changes happen.
Absolutely, and that partnership is so important. And I know while you were here, Des Copley, last month, you also met with AmCham Kurdistan and with Dori. And Dori, maybe I can ask, out of those meetings and out of the things that you've heard from U.S. member companies, what are kind of the biggest challenges that they're facing, and what are the things that the KRG, the Kurdistan Regional Government, is doing to address those concerns?
Lisa, mainly was the red tape that everyone faces. I face and everybody else, and I think I saw a lot of reforms with the current government. The reforms are very effective. Something caught my eye, one-stop shop the KRG is doing to really cut through the red tape and support the businesses, so they're not dealing with too much red tape. And I think that's the biggest part of it, and that's costly.
So you see the Kurdistan Regional Government as being responsive to the needs and concerns of the business community? Very much so. I mean, since we're seeing a lot of changes, and the changes are taking effect, we're noticing it. While I'm on the ground with my business, we notice that, and that's very positive. Absolutely. That's great to hear. Maybe Patricia, I can ask from your perspective, working with startups, how you see things.
Yeah, I think things are improving. So for example, the registration process for businesses is online, and that wasn't the case before. So that's been an improvement. I think one thing that we've been doing is trying to draw attention to the different challenges startups face relative to larger companies, and we're bringing this information forward. So we're working a lot with USAID, GIZ, the Dutch government, for example, all of whom I think are really prioritizing this. I know that in a few months' time, there's going to be a meeting in Erbil relating to some of these registration challenges, and we've really been advocating on behalf of the startups. And policy change can be slow sometimes. So what we've tried to do is help startups navigate some of these challenges. So for example, we've written a Roadmap to Startup, which is a guide that helps startups register their businesses. So essentially how to navigate the process and facilitate the process as it is. But we've seen that the government has been willing to listen, and we regularly invite the chambers of commerce, for example, to speak to our startups. So it's been positive.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I think we're almost out of time, so I just want to say thank you to all of you for participating today in this panel. It's been a really interesting discussion. And I also want to say thank you to Steve and Anna, the American Chamber of Commerce, and the U.S. Iraq Business Council for hosting this discussion today and this entire conference. It's really wonderful. So thank you guys for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Have a nice day.
todo, todo. Quelqu'un comment? Pas de tout. Come.
So, good day, everybody, again. I hope that we have now begun again. So, it gives me very great pleasure to welcome our next speaker, His Excellency Reber Ahmed Khalid, the Kurdistan Regional Government Minister of Interior. Kak Reber heads the ministry that is responsible for a wide range of services, including law enforcement, homeland security, and civil defense, such as the firefighting service. Kak Reber was appointed to this position in July last year after a long and notable career in intelligence. This career included several years at the Kurdistan Region Security Council, where he attained the rank of Major General. We all know that for any business decision to succeed, whether it's to begin a joint venture, enter a nascent market like Kurdistan, or to invest hard-earned capital, knowing the security situation is crucial. There is no one better than Kak Reber to tell us how the KRG is securing the environment for investment in Kurdistan. So over to you, Kak Reber.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my friends in the United States, I would like to start by thanking the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Steve Lotus and his colleagues in particular, and of course the KRG representation in Washington for the invitation and for organizing this important and timely conference. I would also like to express my gratitude to all the participants and representatives of American companies who are taking part in this conference today. We believe this is an indication of your keen interest on expanding your operations into our region and widening the U.S. Kurdistan commercial partnership. It's my pleasure to participate in this conference and have the opportunity to shed light today on the many ways my government is already providing a safe and secure environment for foreign investment. I want to share three key messages. Firstly, Kurdistan continues to ensure a safe and secure physical environment. Providing safety and security is vital for governance, and it's essential for the prosperity of any nation. The Kurdistan region is often prized as a beacon of stability because it's an open and stable society that shares the same values of democratic countries. As of today, we are gratified to say that there has not been a single case of American or coalition personnel being killed or injured in our territory. Our security forces work day in, day out to ensure the safety of our citizens, but also of all our foreign guests, including many thousands of foreign investors and business peoples. Our region's stability and security is very different from many other parts of Iraq since 2003. As a government, we have worked very hard to make sure that guests visiting and residing in Kurdistan, whether for business or leisure, remain safe. I credit this to several things, including thousands of hardworking and selfless security personnel across provinces of Erbil, Sulaymaniyah, Duhok, and Halabja. A vigilant public that has no tolerance for extremism or violence. and close coordination between provinces and agencies and coalition partners. Kurdistan region has an organized security policy represented by the Kurdistan Region Security Council. This council, which has played a leading role in protecting the people of Kurdistan, oversees intelligence operations and coordinations on various matters. The real win for us was the creation of a joint operations room in Erbil in 2014, allowing us to closely work with the global coalition to exploit our intelligence for addressing common goals against terrorist groups. For oil and gas, we have 3 brigades under the Ministry of Interior protecting critical infrastructure. And where possible, we have also worked with the private sector to share the burden. For example, we have worked to develop a framework for private security sector firms, allowing more than 66 companies to now register. My second message today is that Kurdistan needs foreign expertise. With the fight against ISIS finally beginning to turn, our focus is now addressing the needs of the Kurdistani peoples. And while our immediate priority is to organize our public finances, security remains as a priority. Nonetheless, we need to welcome more foreign investment in our region to help us reach our potential and deliver real business opportunities. We are making it easier to getting foreign expertise into Kurdistan, working closely with the Ministry of Labor, with some 80 companies now registered and a modern e-visa and residence system now in place. The rights and protections of foreign expertise is secured. We also have a counter-human trafficking unit to stop abuses against foreign workers as part of our commitment to addressing forced labor. Thirdly, my government wants peace and prosperity for all of Iraq, including the disputed territories. Kurdistan can be an investment hub and jumping off point for businesses looking to invest across Iraq as a whole. I have been in close contact with my federal counterparts in Baghdad to help ensure we all are able to make the most of businesses opportunities across Iraq, which is itself an important part of bringing peace and prosperity to all Iraqi citizens. In Sinjar, for example, following months of talks, we have finally agreed on a roadmap to demilitarize the district. Restore municipal governance and allow the Yazidis to write their own future. This will allow the area in time to return to normality and promote prosperity, as well as pave the way to implement the constitutional Article 140 in Sinjar and in other rest of disputed area. This is part of our long-standing commitment to helping those in need. As you know, more than 1 million displaced Iraqis and Syrian refugees still call Kurdistan their home. I believe that for more Kurdistan's mosaic of different ethnic and religious groups living peacefully together has been key for them. And despite our ongoing financial crisis, the KRG continues to provide food and shelter to all of them. Regrettably, the federal government has not been able to provide adequate assistance. We thank the United Nations, the United States, and our international partners, and all the NGOs and charity organizations for their support and contributions. For your companies, I hope you will see Kurdistan as a possible base for operations in your future business plans. Dear guests and colleagues, in summary, I would like to emphasize that security-wise, Kurdistan region is safe and stable and ready for more investment. The Ministry of Interior will continue working non-stop to preserve the stability in the region in order to let our citizens pursue their dreams and enable businesses to grow. Protecting this region and its values is a shared duty. I believe that our friends in the international community must stand with us to support our shared values, and your presence here will help cement it. Again, I would like to extend my thanks to the organizers of this conference, as I hope we will be able to convene at the same table in the near future. Thank you very much for hearing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Minister. We really do appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and for sharing your perspectives. That was incredibly insightful. We're very excited to turn to the next part of our program. As part of this conference, we thought it was really important to underscore the importance of startups and small and medium-sized enterprises, that they're in there creating an ecosystem that is really vital in the Kurdistan region and in Iraq, that will ultimately encourage more people to take risk and pursue a path of entrepreneurism. And we know that this is important to the long-term economic sustained growth of the Kurdistan region and Iraq. And it certainly doesn't happen overnight, we realize that, but we know that we need examples and we need success stories that have paved the way for others to follow. And I can't think of anybody that fits that description better than Yadgar Marani, the founder and CEO of Lezu. When we're looking at the confluence of entrepreneurism, creativity, market demand, and a company that's really serving as a bridge between the United States and our technology communities, our venture capitalists, and that kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem there in the Kurdistan region and in Iraq, you have an incredible story with Lezu. And Yadgar, I'd love to start off our discussion if you can really tell us about your company and what you're doing in the Kurdistan region.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for having me here today. I really appreciate for giving us the opportunity to be presenting our story today. So Lezu is an on-demand delivery service on the path of becoming a super app for Kurdistan region in Iraq. We essentially deliver food, groceries, pharmaceuticals, and recently we've added more services in the sense that we can get your clothes for laundry, or you can get your COVID test through our nursing services, as well as you can even have your pet to go for a walk with one of our team members. So Lezu is the first Iraqi Kurdish startup to be backed by Y Combinator, which is one of the main accelerators in the United States that's backed one of the top startups in the US, such as Airbnb, Instacart, and DoorDash, and many more. So Lezu was the first Iraqi Kurdish startup to be backed by Y Combinator, which is one of the main accelerators in the United States, that has backed one of the most well-known startups in the United States, such as Airbnb, Instacart, and DoorDash, and many more. Lezu is also the first Iraqi Kurdish startup to be raising the largest seed round of investment in the country. We started with 3 co-founders 2.5 years ago. And today, I'm happy to say we are a team of 270 members and growing faster than ever. We realized that there is a lot of challenges in the Kurdistan region as well as Iraq, such as the infrastructural gaps, starting from mapping, addressing payments, as well as deliveries. So we started with deliveries, and we managed to solve the issues from the ground up with the mapping and addressing and the payment services. This is when we realized we are building a digital infrastructure for the country, not only a startup that is doing on-demand delivery services. And this is the same as startups that started in Southeast Asia, such as Grab and Gojek, which started with transportation and then later on moved on of becoming super apps that actually contributed to the GDP of Indonesia. For example, Gojek has become a very massive a success story for Southeast Asia. And the same model was extended for Latin America, where you have Rappi, that also was backed by Y Combinator, which today serves as one of the main startups growing faster than ever in Latin America with 25,000 couriers, as well as 1,500 employees. So we realized that building this digital infrastructure is going to accelerate the economy, is going to open new gates for brick and mortar businesses, such as restaurants and pharmaceuticals and supermarkets, to have more channels of sales and to have more reachability for with their customers. At the same time, we opened a new door for new human resources and talent, starting from software development engineers to sales to even couriers. Couriers have, like essential workers, have played a significant role, especially during the current situation. And we are happy to be the pioneer super app that has actually managed to pick up these businesses during these tough times. And having the current crisis that have happened in Iraq, especially with the drop in the oil prices, as well as the pandemic, our industry has actually gone and flourished. And we're happy to be on this path. We're happy to be setting this precedent. And we can see that more of these examples are going to be erupting and emerging in Iraq and Kurdistan. We've seen recently that Talabat, which is one of the main delivery platforms in the Gulf, and MENA, who's going to be launching soon in Erbil. And we are happy to be a proof of concept for these larger companies and conglomerates to see that Iraq truly and the Kurdistan region are truly markets that have a lot of potential for these players to be operating in. So, please.
No, yeah, I was just going to say it's really interesting to hear the evolution, of Lezu, from your kind of initial idea to where you are today, and you spoke a little bit to how you've essentially adapted to this COVID-19 reality that we're all living and working in. But I'd love to see if you could drill down a little bit more on how the pandemic has impacted your company, and both on your business operations, but also on some of the plans that you've had.
Well, that's a very good question. So the pandemic has played as a double-edged sword for us. On one hand, of course, due to the health crisis and how the health sector has been overwhelmed, that did cause issues for us in terms of our operations, and especially with the lockdowns that the governments were under pressure to have in the markets, similar to other governments, which they had to immediately respond to the pandemic. So that did have a lot of impact on our overall operations, but at the same time, we were the main pillar for people who were in need of having things to be delivered to them, as well as these businesses to have a door for them to reach their customers. I think Lezu played a major role during the pandemic, especially in the Kurdistan region. We've had a lot of our own businesses and partners who've actually said that Lezu was one of the main reasons where they managed to survive throughout the pandemic. And we deployed a lot of facilities and simplifications for these businesses to manage to have their businesses operating despite having the pandemic going on. And at the same time, we've seen that the pandemic did serve the industry in the sense that today in the US, you have, let's choose 3 startups from Y Combinators themselves, such as Instacart, DoorDash, and Airbnb, who are actually planning to be publicly listed and in the US. This is a major success story for the US itself, and the same story can be replicated for the rest of the world. So we're happy to be seeing that these industries are the pioneering and the innovative industries which are starting a new wave of how commerce should be dealt with, and how businesses can reach their customers, and how these tech enabling companies can actually have a major contribution to the economy. And the three examples that I mentioned have actually proved to be serving really well, especially in the US. We're happy that Lezu is also following the same footsteps of these other giant companies.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. I have to say a major credit to you and really all of your employees, during a time of crisis, and really it's been an extended crisis for all of us around the globe. But for your company to help, step into the gap and help provide, many of those essential services and helping people keep people connected and getting goods and services to them, that's a wonderful thing, and we're great to see Lezu filling that gap. Let me ask you one final question. Would really love to hear, what are your aspirations for Lezu, both in the Kurdistan region, but more broadly, Iraq overall?
So our aspirations is that Lezu can continue on being a success story, because the success story of Lezu can set a healthy precedent and a strong precedent for future entrepreneurs, and as well as venture capital, to look at Iraq as a potential market, as well as entrepreneurs having more a case study where they can use as a resource, where they can then follow the same footsteps as Lezu, and how Lezu managed to go from a startup with 3 employees to a startup that today have reached almost 270 employees, and how did they manage to bring investment in the country. In Iraq and Kurdistan, agriculture and oil have played one of the main 2 industries until this point. But the point now and the turning point is that you have tech enabling companies that are going to make a different contribution and will open new opportunities and doors in Iraq and Kurdistan, where the private sector and the public sectors have not witnessed before. We believe that startups are going to become these entities. We're going to be acting from bottom up to have significant change and significant reformations in terms of how work can be done, how companies should be established, and how investment can be drawn to the country. So we've seen that from looking at it from 2018 until now. In 2018, we just launched in Erbil, and Kareem, as one of the subsidiaries who recently got acquired by Uber, which is one of the largest transportation companies, just started in Iraq. And today we're seeing that more companies have entered Iraq, more investment has come to Iraq, where Delivery Hero, being a multi-billion-dollar company that operates all across the world, is going to have one of their products also being launched in Iraq. And we're also seeing more international companies who also started as a startup now trying to look at Iraq as a potential market. So we're quite proud to be that proof of concept, where now investment and other sectors are going to emerge in Iraq and Kurdistan due to having healthy precedents or successful precedents set, such as stories like Lezu and stories such as Kareem entering the market and making a major contribution to the transportation sector. We are looking forward to also be making a huge contribution to the overall digital infrastructure of the country, and we hope to become the first unicorn of Iraq and Kurdistan. Of course, those are very high ambitions, but when we started 2.5 years ago, we had high ambitions to get to where we are today. So we're also confident that with the same momentum, we can also reach that goal one day.
Well, yeah, it's great that you're aiming high, and it is great to hear the success you've had to date, and we, of course, wish you well in your future endeavors. And we're really excited to have you as a member of our U.S. Iraq Business Council at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and we look forward to working with you. And it really is exciting for you to share not only your story, but as well as some of the other opportunities and things that we should be keeping an eye out for. So Yadgar Marani, a co-founder and CEO of Lezu, thank you so very much for being with us today, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Well, we're in the home stretch. And as I think about it, I should have mentioned to Yadgar, I think you may have heard my basset hound barking in the background, and we could certainly use that dog walking service. But we are in the home stretch, and we're going to stay with the private sector for our discussion. As Ambassador Yassine mentioned earlier in the program, this conference is focusing on the business community, so we look forward to hearing from a panel comprised of business leaders representing companies across a different variety of sectors. And we look forward to hearing from each, their perspectives on the business outlook for the Kurdistan region of Iraq, as well as their company's aspirations and thoughts on next steps that could be taken to improve the business climate. So please let me welcome to the panel Jeffrey Holacek, Vice President, Government Relations and Business Development at Honeywell, Caroline Burson, Senior Director for Global Public Policy and Strategic Engagement at PepsiCo, Rita Al-Shahibi, Director and the Country Head for Iraq at Citibank, and Alan Yazbek, Regional Director for the Middle East and Africa at Cochlear. We really do appreciate it, and it's great to see all of you here today. And I'm going to start off asking each of our panelists the same question. And if we can briefly begin by hearing about what your company is doing in the Kurdistan region of Iraq and what your outlook is going forward. And Jeffrey, we'll start with you.
Steve, and thanks for inviting Honeywell to participate in this very important discussion. Honeywell is a technology company, and we provide a lot of technology to countries throughout the region, primarily in Iraq and especially in the Kurdistan region. We're focused primarily on the oil and gas sector. We have an office in Erbil. We've had one there for a while, and we have plans to expand our office there. But there's a lot more we can and should be doing in Kurdistan. We've got a lot of technologies that can help the KRG address some of their reform agendas items. We heard about those during our conference today, about diversification of the economy, about digital transformation, and about infrastructure development. So I hope we'll have a couple of seconds to talk about maybe those in a little while. Thanks.
Jeff, thank you so much. And Caroline, I can ask that same question of yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to join today's panel. We're similarly grateful to be included here. Many people know my company, PepsiCo, as brand Pepsi, but around the world, including in the Kurdistan region, we are also very much a food and agriculture company as well. And on the latter, it was a priority that I found heartwarming to hear featured on so much of the discussion earlier this morning. We work closely with local partners to source local materials and manage the distribution of many of our products in the Kurdistan region. And we produce and distribute many beloved brands in the country, including Pepsi, 7-Up, Mirinda, Lipton, and Lay's potato chips. We operate in Kurdistan through our beverage bottling partner, Al Hayat Company, which was established in 2004 and is an industry leader, owning and operating one of the largest fleets of distribution vehicles in the region, as well as with our franchise snack partner in Sulaymaniyah, the Green Iraq Company for Ready Food Production, also known as GEICO, which was established in 2015 and has been locally manufacturing potato chips in country since the beginning of 2019, and also locally sourcing several raw materials and services. Our system accordingly provides hundreds of job opportunities in the Kurdistan region, supporting our operations there and our distribution across the rest of Iraq. We've been privileged to be able to stand up with our community as well in Kurdistan throughout the COVID-19 period by partnering with the Rwanda Foundation to provide meals and educational support to those that are most vulnerable. And to your questions, Steve, around our outlook, we see a lot of potential in the Kurdistan region for our sector. The region is growing and evolving, and we look forward to looking for additional ways to partner with the KRG to support Iraq and the broader region.
Well, thank you, Caroline. For you, Andrew, it's interesting to hear the focus on the local relationships, and very interesting. Next, I'm going to turn to you next, and would love to hear your Citibank's outlook. And then Alan will come to you with that point on the final round.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much for this forum. Citibank has been in Iraq now since 2005, mainly working in the oil and gas industry, supporting all the multinationals in Iraq that are involved in that sector. We also are involved with the government in the central part of the country, Baghdad mainly, and also in the KRG. It's a bit different. The evolution of that region has been a bit different from the rest of Iraq. There is a private sector that is emerging, that has emerged and is still emerging, and we have a lot of interest in supporting that private sector becoming regional and even global. So how does that work with the companies in Kurdistan? Well, a lot of these companies that are private now have relations with main players, whatever the sector is, and those main players are our clients. So how do we make sure that those major players have the comfort to have a strategic relationship in the long term with those KRG private companies? Well, that's our role. We want to make sure that this happens, because the more we get involved, the more comfort the outside world will have with those private companies, and that will eventually lead to a development of the Kurdish private companies to becoming not just local, but also regional, and have even a global exposure. Because that's the most important thing, is that the local expertise is there. There needs to be more regional and global exposure so that this can be brought back locally, and make sure that these companies become more resilient and serve an ever more demanding population in Iraq, but also specifically in Kurdistan.
Rita, that's very interesting to hear you describe those dynamics and how you're working with stakeholders that are largely private sector facing. That's very interesting. And then the idea of taking the local, global, kind of the inverse, and the benefits that come out of all of that. Very interesting. Alan, would love to hear your thoughts from Cochlear's perspective, what your business currently is doing and what your outlook is going forward.
Thank you, Steve. Allow me first to start by thanking you and the Chamber and the members of the Chamber and the Council for their hard work in putting this conference together, and the opportunity to share information about Cochlear and our activities in the KRG. Cochlear produces and supplies medical hearing devices for children and adults who have lost their sense of hearing. It often comes as a surprise to learn that hearing is the only of our five senses that can be fully restored, really fully restored. Cochlear's technology is called cochlear implants, and it's used to assist those who are born deaf or those who have lost most of their hearing and do not experience a benefit using hearing aids. In such cases, cochlear implant technology has been proven to effectively restore hearing. Now, focusing on children with cochlear implants are technologically enabled to hear. Hearing then enables them to develop their spoken language, which means they are most likely to attend mainstream schools, pursue higher education, and become active and productive members of their community. Now, over recent years, the KRG started to prioritize the provision of cochlear implant technology. And since 2014, and in partnership with our distributor in the Kurdistan region, Cochlear had the honor of successfully supporting 3 hospitals in the start of their cochlear implant programs. Now, these programs have since then helped hundreds of recipients of our technology, mostly children, hear for the first time. The provision of the technology took place mainly through public contracts in the past, and more recently through charity support and private funding. Cochlear support revolved around setting the cochlear implants programs up, providing training to healthcare professionals locally and abroad on the state-of-the-art techniques in cochlear implantation. Now, looking at the future, there remains a challenge in diagnosing hearing loss early and ensuring that every child in need of a hearing solution is given one as soon as possible after the diagnosis. The WHO estimates that up to 5 in 1,000 may be born deaf, and that globally less than 5% of individuals are in need of a hearing solution are actually receiving one. So this issue of access to hearing and later to education is our common challenge for the future, uniting the KRG as the primary healthcare provider, the healthcare professionals, and Cochlear as the global cochlear implant industry leader. Back to you, Steve.
Alan, very, very fascinating to hear what Cochlear is doing. And it's obviously a healthcare in general, but what you're doing has such a personal impact on people's lives. So that's really fascinating to hear. And we'll come back to you in our next round. Jeff did want to circle back around to you. Honeywell, of course, works in so many different areas, and really would love to hear what the company's aspirations are for the Kurdistan region of Iraq or in Iraq overall.
Up to now, we've been exclusively focused in the oil and gas industry, working with the region's refineries, bringing advanced technology to help them make sure that they're operating at peak efficiency. But there's so many other areas of potential cooperation that I think that we need to investigate. For instance, we heard about digitization, and if you go to the website, there's a pretty good discussion on their initial digitization plan. And we're a digitization company. We help governments and countries all over the world. So that's one area that I think we really need to discuss. We bring a lot of smart technologies in terms of smart city surveillance and security systems, as well as smart buildings and smart city management. And that's a priority for the KRG. So I think there's a lot of room for discussion here. We're very excited about it. We also do smart hospitals and logistics, digital logistics, which I think, listening to your last speaker, would be something I think would be interesting. And lastly, transportation. We're also very involved globally in international aerospace and airports. And we know that the Duhok International Airport is being planned, and we're very interested in participating in that project. So there's a lot to do. We look forward to welcoming Her Excellency Bayam Rahman to our tech center in the next couple of weeks for a tour and a more detailed discussion of what could possibly lie ahead for us. Thanks.
Well, Jeff, that's very interesting, and it does really reflect the breadth of the company, and you have expertise across so many different areas. It's great to hear that. And I know Honeywell had some really good news in August when the Prime Minister of Iraq, Prime Minister Khatami, came, and you had some important signs then. So congratulations, and we look forward to seeing what Honeywell is going to do going forward. Caroline, coming back to you, you talked about, and it's absolutely true. It's absolutely fascinating as well. How you describe kind of PepsiCo also as an agriculture company, and would love to hear your thoughts on what the future of agriculture and the food and beverage sector in general looks like in the Kurdistan region of Iraq and what that means to Pepsi.
Thank you so much, Steve. As briefly mentioned, and as you just alluded to, we see a lot of potential in the Kurdistan region for the food, beverage, and agriculture sector. For example, we currently have a strong footprint within the food system in Kurdistan and across Iraq, and we are looking to expand our support to farmers and across the agricultural sector to increase our sourcing of local potatoes from the Kurdistan region in Iraq, with the target of reaching 100% locally sourced potatoes. This progress will correspond to increased investments in terms of adding additional employees at our facilities and in commissioning and expansion of our manufacturing footprint in the Kurdistan region. We also look forward to partnering with these local farmers to improve the sustainability efforts of their agricultural practices and to promote greater inclusivity within their work streams. We welcome the support of the KRG, both in country and from the U.S., continued support, I should say, for our operations, and we look forward to unlocking future and further opportunities to work with the government in this sector. Thank you.
Well, Caroline, thank you so much. And it's great to have such an important company like PepsiCo at the table and active with us on the U.S. Iraq Business Council. So we appreciate all that you and your colleagues do. Rita, would love to come back to you again. I thought that first round answer that you provided was absolutely fascinating. Could you share a little bit more about how Citi is looking to support the private sector in the Kurdistan region of Iraq and even more broadly Iraq in general?
Yes, Steve, thank you. Citi, has been in Iraq since 2005, but we don't have a branch, and we're not looking to opening a branch. Actually, we don't really need to. That's because we have a network of partner banks across the country, which operate as if we technically had a branch. So we are present on the ground through our partners. Now, how do we support the private sector in Iraq and more specifically in the KRG? A lot of these Kurdish companies have realized that they should take their businesses international. And they did that by just going from the local accounting standards to the international accounting standards, which is a great first step. But then comes the real challenge. How do you actually export yourself out of Iraq and from outside gain the banking expertise, the international expertise to bring it back in Iraq? Okay, so we connect the private companies locally through our partner bank network to the outside, to the region, and it could be not beyond the Middle East. And from there, they would have subsidiaries, branches, where they can, in a digital way, in a more efficient way, with all the best practices, operate a business that is both, well, mostly local, but also does have an international nature. And why do we do that? Why do we insist on supporting local private Iraqi and Kurdish companies? That's because it provides the necessary credibility for the outside world to operate and to do business with them in a more meaningful way. And this is a little bit how Citi would. I mean, Citi is a major bank. It's the American bank with the widest network in the world. We are the ideal partner for this, and all these small and medium enterprises or mid corporates in Kurdistan are candidates that we can work with to handhold so that they reach this status to go beyond just going international in the accounting way, but going international really in the financial way. So that's a little bit how we support the private sector, and we've had some moderate success as a beginning.
Rita, I would say it seems like it is just the beginning, and it's really interesting to hear what you're having to see here, because it's really so foundational to the development of a more robust private sector in the Kurdistan region and across all of Iraq. It probably merits an entire conversation and panel on its own, because what you're doing is touching not only every company on this panel, but really every company that looks to do business, whether in the domestic market or, as you mentioned, to export themselves into the larger global market. So thank you for those perspectives. Alan, coming back to you, again, such a takeaway was the personal touch that Cochlear has on individuals and the healthcare and the hearing systems that you're bringing to them. Would love to hear if you had a top recommendation or two that you would want to share with the KRG that would improve the relationship between healthcare companies and access to innovative health systems such as what you're providing, what would those recommendations be or look like? I believe you're muted.
Sorry for that.
There we go.
Can you hear me now? All right, thank you. A very interesting question, Steve. The value of a device like a cochlear implant is seen over the user's lifetime. To successfully achieve this type of long-term impact, KRG health authorities can further partnership with healthcare professionals and industry leaders like Cochlear to understand the scale of the hearing loss issue locally and to measure the positive impact of providing this technology on health economics. The KRG health authorities can also see long-term success by ensuring the cochlear implant programs that are already functioning in the country, that they are reliably funded and that the technology is regularly budgeted for. This is necessary in order to enable continued access to this technology, to keep the industry positively engaged, and to sustain the cochlear implant programs in the hospitals today, and together with the KRG, grow them into the future. Back to you, Steve.
Well, let me close us out here and just to offer my thanks on behalf of all of our conference participants to Jeff and Caroline, Rita and Alan, and your companies. You're standing here today, but we know there's an entire company and a bunch of colleagues behind you. And we really do appreciate what you're doing in the Kurdistan region and in all of Iraq. And we know that you're kind of representative of many, many other American companies that are doing business across the Kurdistan region. So we're grateful for you taking time out to be with us today and being the voice of the private sector here at the conference. So thank you all very much. And that'll conclude this panel session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we'll come back shortly, and I know we're going to go to our closing, and I'm going to be joined by our co-host, Representative Bayan Sami Rahman, for some final thoughts, and as we pivot to day two. So I really hope people have enjoyed what we've put on the broadcast today, and thank you for staying with us. We really do appreciate you making time to join us for this conference. I do want to take time to acknowledge and thank, of course, the Prime Minister and the Deputy Secretary and all of our speakers and panelists who have been with us today. So we'll look forward to hearing and being joined by our friend Bayan. And I really am eager to hear what her thoughts are on a couple of the highlights from day one. I know for myself, certainly I think hearing from the Prime Minister and hearing his vision for the economy and what that looks like, particularly on the diversification agenda that he has laid out, I think is a very important message for all of us to hear. But of course, being the U.S. Chamber, it's wonderful to hear the perspectives from that final panel and Yadgar with Lezo right before that panel. It's great to hear those private sector voices with us. And then I know we very much look forward to tomorrow, day two. We've got a great lineup for day two. I know we'll hear from the Deputy Prime Minister of the Kurdistan Regional Government, Kubad Talabani. He'll be joined by Joey Hood, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Near East, somebody with a lot of experience in Iraq, right off the top of that program. So we're very much looking forward to that, as well as several more panels and speakers. I'm very much looking forward to Bayan joining us, and we'll look forward to closing out today. I do know it's getting late there in the Kurdistan region, and we want to be respectful of your time. But Bayan, would love to get your kind of highlights from day one.
Well, so many highlights, Steve. As you said, I hope those who joined us online today and then the viewers through Rudao have found it interesting and beneficial. Of course, it was fantastic to have the Prime Minister kick off the day with the Deputy Energy Secretary. And one thing that I think the Prime Minister signaled and we should all be looking out for, he said that this week the KRG will sign a major deal that will be the basis for the KRG's digital transformation. So he kind of gave us a little bit of a scoop going back to my journalism days. So that's exciting. But overall, I think to have so many friends from the U.S. Department of State, Ambassador Tula, David Copley, Rob Waller, the Consul General in Erbil, having them join us, I think it underscores the commitment that there is government to government between the KRG and the United States government. But also Ambassador Farid Yassin. You know, those of us in Washington, we see him around. He does his work elegantly, very smoothly. He is a very good champion for Iraq. And it's great to have him here. We all know that we need Erbil and Baghdad to be cooperating together much, much more. And I think that was great too. As you said, Steve, really the other highlight for me was to have the range of companies. You have, you know, giants like Citi, one of the biggest banks in the world, Honeywell, PepsiCo, and then you have Lazoo, which is this young startup and has has really set the precedent by having support from the Y Combinator. So lots and lots of exciting stuff today, and lots of things to look forward to tomorrow as well. And I can talk about that as well if you like, but I'm not sure if we're out of time.
Well, Ben, I would just echo everything that you said. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the highlights from day one. And I'd have to mention Minister Safin as well. That was a great panel, and we're really glad it worked for him to join, and yourself being on that panel. It was very interesting to hear. You know, we're coming at everything from a business perspective, but it's always great to hear such seasoned and experienced diplomats share their perspectives on the overall relationship. So we're absolutely grateful for that. And yeah, Ben, I'm very excited about day two tomorrow, and would love your thoughts on what we should all be keeping an eye out for tomorrow.
Yes, and Steve, again, I want to apologize to Safin that we had some technical problems, but it was great that in the end he was able to join the discussion. So as you said earlier, tomorrow we will kick off with a discussion between His Excellency the Deputy Prime Minister Qubat Talabani and Joey Hood, the Principal Assistant Secretary at the State Department. I think that'll be a very interesting conversation. Joey Hood was Deputy Ambassador in Baghdad, so he has a lot of knowledge of Iraq and Kurdistan, and actually much of the Middle East, where he's been posted so many times. And of course, Qubat was a representative here in Washington, so he has many friends here. He knows a lot about America and American business. So I think that'll be very interesting. There are also two ministerial panels. So Begar Khan, the Agriculture Minister of the KRG, she will be discussing food security in Kurdistan and the steps the KRG has taken already despite coronavirus. And then there's also another ministerial panel with the Minister of Planning, Minister of Finance, and the Chairman of the Investment Board. I think they will tell us a lot about the KRG's vision. And I'm also looking forward to hearing from the Chairman of the Investment Board, Dr. Mohammed Shukri, about the one window or one-stop shop that they're setting up so that people who need to register in Kurdistan, register their investment in Kurdistan, don't need to spend weeks and months. They can do it very quickly. So a lot again to look forward to tomorrow. But please, I'll hand over to you, Steve. I'm sure you've got lots of thoughts as well.
Well, thank you, Bayan. I think you touched on some of the things that we should all be keeping an eye for. I'm also interested in hearing the energy panel discussion that I know will be led by Dr. Matt Zeiss from the Department of Energy, joined from some really private sector heavyweights. We do look forward to hearing from them. And as you mentioned, of course, that ministerial panel should be thoroughly thoughtful and enriching. As somebody who grew up in the cornfields of Indiana, I always love to hear from anybody that has anything to do with agriculture. So I really do look forward to hear the minister's comments on food security and building out that sector and American participation in it. So, and beyond, I'd be remiss too if I just didn't thank you again for your role in co-hosting this and pulling this all together. And I would just encourage everyone to tune in tomorrow. We look forward to another robust day for day 2 of the conference. And we hope you will come back and join us again to hear from our speakers on day 2. With that, we'll close out day 1, and we wish everybody well, stay safe, and have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.